What's going on, my creative collective? Welcome to another lesson for A Course in Creativity. I don't know what this was. It's, I guess, the equivalent of jazz hands. We'll roll with it. But this lesson is called Subatomic Pool Noodles because it's all about trust. Now, trust is a funny word and it's also so overused, but what we're tying in here, so the theme that I picked up from a lot of the lessons here that I really wanted to introduce in the construct of creative capacity and really being able to connect to yourself, your truth, and to create your world around you through perception, but also through feeling and connecting that to something bigger and beyond you. Whole lot. That's really ambitious, I know. But this subatomic pool noodles to me is about learning how to float downstream. And we do that through, the senses and the ones that are, based in our body, so embodied. But we also do it through the ones that are beyond us a little bit, right? Sixth senses, extrasensory perception. So A Course in Miracles talks a lot about forgiveness. And I think it gets kind of a bad rap sometimes because people think that, when we say I've forgiven somebody, what they're actually saying is like avast ye boundaries. And like they're gone, right? Disappeared. So the idea here is to understand that forgiveness, there's a way, and these are not limited. These are not the senses that forgiveness is limited to, but in the way that we look at creativity and our creative expression, as well as the way that ties to our spiritual beingness and our experience. There are senses that we kind of feel through for forgiveness. So as I was working through this, my efforts were redirected to really start with trust as a sense. Now people might say, what the hell? How does that work? Well, what the hell indeed. Now trust to me, it's a sense because that is your, they say like, oh, your spidey sense that something is off, your sixth sense that something is off, your intuition. And I find that trust and intuition are very closely connected. We'll get to that. There'll be sort of a roundabout way to it, but we'll get there. So stay tuned for that through this particular lesson. But one of the things that I found about trust is that we tend to see it as we place ourselves into this weird discordant relationship to it. It's a dissonance. It really is, because we use trust as a way to push away what it can actually mean for us. Now that too sounds nebulous. So let's get some granularity to it. Trust is, to me, it's not just about putting faith in something outside of you, because then it's something that is outside of you, right? This isn't to say, to center yourself in this. It is to say that what if trust was based on something more foundational than your externalization of a belief in something coming or a belief in an external condition, right? This is what a lot of the way that we interpret trust to be. And I feel like it's a bit of a misuse of trust because, we say, oh, I trust that it's coming. I trust that it will get better. What do we put our trust into? And I'm not talking about trust in relationships, because that's a whole other ballgame. And that I take that very seriously. But this to me is about trust in what are we putting our trust in? This is also tied to faith, right? Like what are we putting our faith into? This isn't also just about spirituality. This applies so much further beyond. Do you just trust that the markets will be stable, right? I'm not going to get into that low vibe stuff right now, but do you trust that you will always have the life that you do? We learned through the pandemic that there's uncertainty, and I think our sense of collective trust was shaken in the systems and things that we originally felt were givens, right? These taken for granted aspects of our existence that we kind of bumped up against. Now we're seeing that they're just not, that is untrue. It is an untrue thing to put our faith into, and not untrue because it's a lie, but because it's not real, right? It's not real. And we go back to the earlier lessons of what real can mean. So this trust as well, we can get twisted and blame. We can blame ourselves for the ways that this trust can show up. I think about trust in terms of tower moments in the tarot, right? Those moments where, and tarot is largely predictive or, descriptive and whatnot, but there are ways that it can show up where it just calls your attention to something. It calls your attention to something in your life, and that's fine. But when it comes to tower moments, I see it so often placed in blame, right? We encase ourselves in this blame game, like, well, it just keeps on happening. And, then people throw around things like take responsibility, take ownership. And I think about how much more the world needs compassion right now, right? Because the taken for granted facts and aspects of our existence, many of us knew that they weren't working. Many of us knew that these things were not, working together to our benefit. True, right? Very true. But what we also don't realize and what we also forget is that we need more compassion than blame, right? So trust is one part about the foundation of where you're putting your trust in and what purpose trust serves for you, right? The other part of this is understanding that we can use trust. We can use trust as a way to push away blame. How can we do this? Well, Chuck Spezzano's book, he has a book about guilt, and I'll put it in the description below. It's actually right here, though. I'll edit that in so that it shows up here. But he has a book about blame and guilt and how they work together. And one of the things that he talked about in that book was that we can often seek out blame. We seek out blame and we get into a place where we feel guilty and bad. So what we do is we see through that lens, and then we perceive people around us as the thing that we are trying to push away from ourselves. So when we get into this place of blame, we're in a state that is temporary, right? And we're saying, I trust that this will work out differently. What we're doing is using trust in place of doing the work for ourselves. What we're doing is saying that we trust in the universe to deliver something, which is true. It always works out, right? Things are always working out. They can work out for you if you believe that you have the capacity to make the best of what's around you. And people might say, well, that's naive. Not really. Not really, because that's the only way that you'll get through those situations. And most people are more comfortable with blame. They're more comfortable with guilt because we live in a culture that has this polarity between, you're either compassionate towards the things that are happening in your life, or you're in the state of blame and needing to push that blame off, because to just sit with that means that it's your fault. And systems are not your fault, my darlings. Systems are not your fault. The things that I might encounter in people, someone yesterday, they kept using the wrong pronoun, and the person with them corrected them, and then they said no, and then they used the wrong pronoun again, as if to reinforce it, as if to say, like, no, you are who I tell you are, right? That kind of just aggressive disregard for another person's humanity, right? As a trans person, that happens, but it doesn't mean it's my fault. And I think we need to release ourselves from this belief that trust that trust has anything to do with fault or fault finding. I think we really need to absolve ourselves from this guilt so that we can see past the impulse to say that if something bad happens, it happens, and there's no way to look at it from a different perspective. There's no way to see that it's happening for you. There's no way to do that, because when we push away those thoughts, it's a reaction and it's a defense and it's a denial, right? It's a denial of the multiplicity of realities that are available to us. It's a denial also of your multidimensionality. It's a denial of the reality that exists right now that is maybe not what you thought it would be. But the good news is that there's a whole slew of other ones that are shifting and changing that you can attach to, and it doesn't all have to happen at once. That's the other aspect of this when it comes to trust as a sense. We say, I trust in it, and then we push away. So resist the urge to blame yourself and to push away the possibilities that are available to you and the possibilities that are around you, because you feel that the fact that the whole thing isn't here right now is your fault, because it's not. That is the furthest thing from the truth. Be accountable. Yes. Take radical responsibility for what you can do right now. Yes. But if you look at the thing you want and then you sit in this place of blame and guilt, and you use the absence of it to berate yourself for the reasons why it's not here, and use that as your reason why it'll never happen, it means that you will be caught up in this cycle of negativity until it catches up to you in the form of an epiphany or a tower moment. And see, even that, it's something that you don't know what you don't know. So just go easy on yourself. When it comes to this sense of trust, though, this sensory experience of trust, right? That's the senses of forgiveness. How do you experience trust? Where do you feel it in your body? Where do you feel it in your body? Where does it land? And I'm talking about energy centers. Where do you feel trust? And what are the nuances of trust as well for you? How does the nuance of trust show up? What does that look? Is it a gut reaction? Is it in your solar plexus? Is it in your heart space? Is it in your throat? Where do you feel trust? Where do you feel trust in yourself, in others, in things around you, in your thoughts? How does that land in your body? How does that land in your body? Because that is ultimately your truth. The beginning stages, the energetic seeds of your truth are in trust. I was first introduced to A Course in Miracles and Marianne Williamson's work in about 08, 09. And one of the things that I found so healing about it was this innocence, this remembrance that you didn't come here guilty, that you were not birthed into this experience bad or wrong, despite what so many doctrines teach, right? That you're bad, you're born bad, so you have to spend a lifetime atoning for that. Nope. No. You're innocent. You're innocent. Just sit with the weight of that, right? And it is a weight because it means that you realize how much heavier the stuff you were carrying was. And that is an awareness. That is a weight of awareness. It's not a weight of pressure. It's the lifting of pressure and the realization that you don't have to carry the weight anymore. When I was reading A Course in Miracles, I realized that I don't need to hold up the whole sky for other people, and that it's safe for me to just bask beneath it. So maybe just remember that for yourself. You don't have to hold the whole sky up. Because when you step back and you realize that the sky is holding itself up, and this is true of relationship dynamics too, the sky will hold itself up. Your job here is to bask in the light beneath it. Your job was not ever to hold up the sky or to hold up someone else's sky or to hold the sun in it. Your job is to bask, which sounds super selfish. But it's what that action makes accessible within you that allows you to shine the light for other people who may be confused about where they need to stand beneath that sky. I know I used to bristle when people would say, well, you have all you need. And I would be like, no, I don't. I don't have answers. I don't have stuff that I need. I don't have the, financial situation that I need. I don't have, and I would go through this list of all of the don't haves, which is, as you can imagine, not great feeling. Like, it didn't feel good, but I felt like I had to justify this because I would bristle against it. Because instead of hearing you have everything you need, I would hear you don't have what you need. And I would feel guilty because I would look at how much I didn't have. And this is where we can really screw with trust as a sense, where we can turn it against ourselves and use it as a reason to justify blame and guilt and self-hatred, so much self-hatred. Because we see our experience and it's all old news, right? Kyle C said that in one of his videos. He worded it beautifully, like it's all old news, everything around you. So if that's the case, which it is, then everything that you don't have right now is literally just matter organizing itself around your awareness of what's possible, right? And some people, again, will bristle at this and get mad. That's fine. I had to take that journey too. I have a t-shirt for you if you want, right? It's a stage in the journey where you get upset because you think, well, I don't have all of this stuff. But that's not the point right now. If you use the acquisition of stuff and if you use the finish line as your reason to feel miserable, life will absolutely continue. It will, it's okay for you to do that. But do you want to? Do you want to use that as your reason to stay disconnected? Because it doesn't honor you. It doesn't serve you. So it's like you can be miserable in the state that you're in right now, or you can choose something different because you know that even in the most ridiculous and impossible situations, things will shift. They just do. They just do. And I firmly believe that. And, people might say, well, that's Pollyanna. Then that's fine. Give me a label, whatever. It's okay. But I really do believe, and I firmly believe that there's something more that we can put our trust in. And it starts with us. When people say you have everything you need, even I have done this before where I bristle against it because I'm like, well, I don't actually. I don't have the answers. I don't have, all of the ways that I want things to work out perfectly. But the thing is that if you're always understanding at a deeper level what it is that you want in your life in terms of material conditions, houses, homes, apartments, cars, jobs, all of that material stuff, but then also the other stuff too, like tenderness, affection, the conditions of relationship, the things that you can't touch, right? I used to bristle up against it because I would say, oh, well, I don't have all the answers. And so there's no way that this is happening for me because I can't, why, this is ridiculous. So I used trust to blame myself. I use trust to blame myself, and I see it all the time. So what happens is we get into this place where we believe that because external circumstances are leaving us feeling powerless, instead of going within, we look to the external circumstances and say, well, I feel powerless right now. Ergo, it means that there's no possible way that this is working out for me because I feel helpless, and that's not a good state. You're right, it's not a good state. So address the state and the perception of the events, because that is going to empower you not to see this as where you are and who you are, right? There's a book that the title is this, it's axiomatic. The title is beautiful. It's called Where You Are Is Not Who You Are. I didn't want to use the phrase without saying the book title. It's so check that book out if you want, but get that into your head too, right? Like, where you are is not who you are. Never was the case. It's understanding this and the energy of that as well. But when you're focused on external circumstances and you're focused on things outside of you, you will really be hesitant to understand that your mind, and people say, well, your mind is 3D. No, not necessarily. Your mind unlocks access to 5D because that changes the emotional state, the biochemical reaction that you're having. They're both connected. They're not separate behaviors. They're not separate things. That's also separating, and that is a frame of the ego, right? That is a frame of ego where it's like separate. So if you focus on it in terms of, well, this is going to get me here and this is going to get me here, we're in separation. We're in a separated mindset. Both are, they align, right? It's some people articulate it as like a hierarchical, ascension. But for me, it's about engaging everything and understanding that it all has purpose. There's no lesser or greater. Because when you buy into that mentality, you discount the beauty of where you are. You discount the beauty of a body. You discount the beauty of the senses that you have that would be seen as less than if you were consistently reaching for something else. That too is part of trust, right? Where do you place your trust? What are you placing your trust in? This is also how people use God against themselves. They use God against themselves because they say, well, God didn't give this to me, so I hate it. I hate the idea of God. I hate that. And hate is a strong word, right? But people do, and they get into even stronger articulations of contempt. Contempt, because you're using trust in a way that acquires something, but trust is not the acquisition of resources. We often use trust as a response to absence, right? This thing is absent, so I trust that it will come. But I would invite you to think about trust as presence, right? Trust as something that is within you. And this is also understanding the separation that can come into play when we look at something outside of ourselves and see the absence of it because we don't have it in our material world. It is not in our sphere. And this is also, kind of realigning our relationship to possession, realigning our relationship to what having means, because everything is temporary. So we get this relationship confused when we think about trust and when we slip into that place. And that's how we can really get a hate on for any kind of, belief in divine anything. We can get a hate on because we're like, well, that failed me. Believing that trusting in this thing failed me. Okay. Just sit in that for a minute. Sit in that feeling for a second. What failed you? Was it God? Was it spirit? Or was it your perspective and expectation of what that meant and what that means because of your relationship and how you use trust? No one is asking us to have all the answers. No one is asking us to have it all figured out. That's us asking us to have everything figured out and then using that as the metric by which we judge spirit, by which we judge our, whatever God means to you. That's the metric that we use. And that's also the metric that we use towards ourselves too. I think about this with transitioning. So I'll tell you a story. Story time. But this, when I first started transitioning, I didn't have all the answers. And when people would say, well, you have everything you need, I would roll my eyes so hard you could probably hear them scrape the ceiling as they went, right? Like I was like, ugh, because I would be like, I don't have all the answers. I feel miserable. I feel this deep gender dysphoria. I feel not great. All of these really negative articulations of I am, right? And that's what this really is thematically addressing, is the I am, right? The sensorial experience of I am. And I would think, well, I don't have everything that I need, but you do. And I did, right? I did have everything I needed. people say, well, I don't have the answers. You don't need all the answers. What does answers mean? You don't have answers. You don't have the next step, because what you're doing is not seeing the next step as one step at a time, which my guide is big on, but it's like you don't have 6 steps ahead of you. So you can't take the leap and then come out smelling like roses, because you understand that you've got to walk through some of the garbage first. And if you believe that walking through the garbage and getting to the other side of things, just if you have any scent of that struggle on you, it means you're less than. No, I would just like to rearrange that perspective for you and say, no, that's not true. So remember, it's one step at a time here. We're not like going from, this one idea to like 12 steps away from that. No, one at a time. When I was transitioning, I found a book. Okay, so this was before I let the rest of the world know my name, and before I started to really lean into transitioning. I found a book called, I'll put it here, Yes, You Are Trans Enough by Mia Violet. That book, I recommend that all cis people read it. So all my cisgender folks watching, highly recommend it. It's a longer book, but it articulates transitioning in a way that is just, it's achingly beautiful. It's so good. But I read that book, right? And I didn't really, expect much from it, because I felt like, I could never be trans enough, because as a non-binary person, people who are binary trans, it can be like, there's some hostility at times. And then, people who are cisgender and queer, there's some hostility sometimes because you don't really fit anywhere. So the title was really a comfort. And it was a coming back home to myself as well. But in that book, there was one part in that book. Okay, so this is before I started transitioning. That book talked about how even if you're not sure, even if you're on the fence about taking, hormones or HRT, and not every trans person does, so do not expect people to conform to your expectations of what transness is. The book said, make the appointment at a clinic. Okay, so I did. I was super nervous. That was one step at a time. That seems like the banality of all next steps. But that was the beginning of everything. And now I have, like gender euphoria on a more regular basis, where, people get pronouns right, people get my name right. Just, it's all, I keep getting visited by this like pubescent acne that is frustrating, but, just stuff to do with transitioning. It's like being tired because your muscles are getting more dense and your body's changing. And, there's like acne where beard oils are like here. It's like where your facial hair will start to come through. So, it's like stuff like that just comes with the territory, but it's like that stuff is also signs of joy, but it was one step at a time. Right? I hadn't gotten my first binder. I was trying to use tape, so it's called trans tape, and I was using that instead of a binder. That was one step at a time. Then I got a binder, and I was like, euphoria, right? So one step at a time. I didn't have all the answers. One step at a time. If somebody had told me way back that I would know and I would have all the answers, you have everything you need, I'd be like, that is bullshit. But it wasn't. I did have all the answers. I did have all the answers that I needed in that moment. I think this is where this presence comes in, where we need to return to that present moment. We need to return to that present moment so that we can feel and we can really sit in the senses that facilitate forgiveness, that facilitate releasing yourself from guilt and blame, right? And even, just and feeling like you have all the answers, because you don't. You really, really don't. Right? You can read as much as you want. You can teach for as long as you want. Like my spiritual awakening started in I was 16. So a while ago, over 15 years now. So it's like, that's how long ago it started, and it reaches new depths and levels, right? You got to trust, but you also have to really take a look at your relationship to trust. And is it something that you're expecting, anything from? Like, are you using trust as a way to avail yourself of how you feel right now? Or are you using trust as a way to connect with the presence of spirit in you and in your life, right? Are you using trust as a way to comfort yourself because you don't have the material conditions that you've created as a sort of bet against spirit or God, or however you word it? Right? How are we using trust? And when we clear that sense, we get this expansion, this expansive, not just knowing, but also an understanding. And it's an understanding that you feel in your body that just bloop, unlocks so much knowledge, but also knowing. And knowledge not in in terms of like things you can read from a book, but knowledge as in like of who you really are, of what you are made of the source from which you come, and letting that lead your life, letting that take the lead in your life. This is about how belief can cause separation from one another. Not because I have beliefs that are different from yours, but it's this slippery way that we use trust, and we kind of weaponize trust against ourselves and others, and even the source and spirit and God from which we come, right? So we can use this in such a weird way where we manipulate ourselves because we're trying to manipulate spirit. But realistically, if your trust is predicated on the assumption that the full picture will present itself to you in the absence of steps that make sense, right? Just these next steps. What's next? You don't have to see everything, right? You don't have to figure out everything. It doesn't have to show up on a billboard. But if you believe that, then you will hesitate to have some kind of understanding that when circumstances arrive, when things shift and change, because they always do, right? We might, opportunity might knock and we might say, well, that sounds a whole lot like something else that happened. So nope. And then we push it away. But that was something that could have been knocking, that could have been awesome. But we get into, again, this relationship with trust where we have to see the full picture. And it's also about how much you trust yourself as well. Do you believe that you're capable, confident, competent enough to deal with things that come through your life and that meet you on your path? Do you believe that you have what it takes? Not just to do things, to make stuff. This is about taking a step back and understanding that we use trust like this, right? And we block the sensory experience. We block information. So we create this filter through which everything comes in. And when that happens, it means that information that might actually be of service to you, helpful, healing, valuable to you, can't make its way through. And we bristle. It just shows up in a split second, bristling against what someone might say, so that we kind of twist ourselves into this and contort ourselves and pretzel into this way of seeing how things, we say this is how it should be, and I am mad because it's not. So I am going to disbelieve in the possibility of it being good. I am going to disbelieve that it could possibly be anything other than how it is right now. And that's how we use trust in ways that really harm us. It's how we flatten ourselves and we limit ourselves from being these these beautifully multidimensional beings that we are, right? And you do have everything you need, because you don't have to figure it all out right now. All it needs to start with is an awareness. Just let the awareness and presence be the start. Understand that that's a step. That's a step. Committing to yourself and to feeling that where you are is a step, right? You do have everything you need. And not because somebody's trying to challenge you and say that you're less than for not having things the way they are right now. No. Understand that when you go to that place initially, that's a reflection of the way that you judge yourself. And you judge yourself first, because then when you judge yourself first, this is part of Chuck Spezzano's book on guilt. When you judge yourself first, then it makes you want to push it away. So you see everyone else through the eyes of that judgment. And that's how we get into this cyclical blame that disconnects us from this really important sense that we need to feel and see forgiveness through. That is your lesson for today. It was at length. It was long. It was so long. So thank you for sticking with me. But if this resonated, please like and subscribe. It helps me to get found in this gigantic YouTube algorithm. And if you feel like this was valuable content and that other people might benefit from it, just even liking it instead of if you're like, I don't want to do both, totally cool. Just then that's fine, because it helps me get found in the algorithm. So. Yes. But this is, if this is where we part, my friends, I hope that wherever this finds you on the time-space continuum, morning, afternoon, or night, that it finds you very, very well. Have a wonderful day.